because we're doing small talk, I showed you guys this. I want to show everyone else. My niece gave me a Father's Day gift. It's a t-shirt and I'm wearing it and I'm going to share it. And if you can't read it, it says, there are two types of people in this world. Number one, those who can extrapolate from incomplete data.
Yeah, but where's the rest of it?
So, yes.
Bob Freeman's in West Hartford. You ever been to East or North Hartford? That's, never mind. Anyway, let's get started, guys. Welcome, everybody.
Hey, good morning. Good to see lots of regulars back. Perhaps some new faces. Are there any new folks here?
Some regulars, some irregulars.
If you're first time caller.
And
so if they are first time, would that make them an irregular?
Then we have to go through the hazing again and all that stuff, right?
A lot of shaved heads.
Exactly. Welcome, everybody. Let's get started. So today we're going to talk about, do you have an agile culture? So I'm going to ask in the chat box, would you put your definition of agile? What does it mean to you when I say agile? And guys, I'll ask you in a second, but let's see what
if I don't want to answer that question? I'm going to just steal from the chat box. Nimble. Thank you, Carol.
I would say nimble personally.
Adjust easily as needed, adaptable, fluid. Oh, I like the word fluid. Flexibility, responsiveness.
Yeah. Ability to shift and
refocus, flexibility to change, adaptable and open to change, flexible, resilient, flexible.
Okay, so they all know it. We don't need to do today's show.
Yeah, we're done. What do you want to talk about?
Record show. Thanks, folks.
You know, the one thing that keeps coming up, we'll talk about too, I know, is change, obviously. But, you know, it is that ability to turn on a dime. Do you guys have anything to add as far as definition? Or?
Well, I would just, we were talking about this kind of in preparing the show, that to me, there's a difference between managing change, as we all have talked about for decades, and being truly agile. And partly that, to me, is just a matter of scope and magnitude, right? It's one thing, we all need to be in the business of managing change, reacting to change, leading change. But to me, being agile means we're talking about change at an incredibly fast pace, at a faster pace than never before. And the organizations that are thriving out there have learned to do just that. They are truly agile. They change on a dime.
Sorry, but can I just address Frederick? Yes, Richard and I switched places today because he's absent and I usually am. And then I had his name still because I had to host the thing. So thank you for noticing it. That is a flexibility thing. It's about change. Geez, color outside the line, Frederick. All right, Sunjay.
So, I was just going to say, it's just flexibility to me is that key. And it's also a matter of being less reactive, right? Because a lot of times people adapt to change or they deal with change and it's a very reactive process and it's about treading water. But whereas if you're agile, it's actually an opportunity to spring forward and thrive from it, not just get by. So that to me is a big distinction.
Yeah, you know, it comes from, for a decade or so, you know, project managers have been using the word agile in project management. And it's sort of seeped into culture of organizations over just the last few years. And it sounds great, right? Like, oh yeah, ability to turn on a dime. But it is not only a mindset. I mean, it has to be ingrained. And it's, you know, one of the things that I have found working with organizations who are agile, well, I shouldn't even say that, who are attempting to be agile, because the point I'm trying to make is it's a journey, right? It's never done. And so organizations just say, we're an agile organization. No, you're not. We're an agile thinking organization. We're striving to be agile. So
we're a work in progress. So you know, in the process of becoming agile. It reminds me of house renovation, right? So you finally, when you do your roof, you do your basement, you upgrade your bathroom, you upgrade your kitchen, all of a sudden, by the time you're finished, it's time to do your roof again. So it is an ongoing process that never ends.
Yeah. And we've proven agility, I think, over the last 14 months, right? I mean, our ability to be agile doesn't mean that we've adapted it into our organizations, but I think it doesn't matter what profession you're in. We've had to, you know, turn on a dime, be nimble.
You know, when I think about this difference between reacting, dealing with change, and being truly agile, many examples come to mind, but the first one that comes to mind for me is, I would say, an organization like Netflix is agile, is pretty darn agile. The traditional broadcast networks are dealing with a lot of change and probably trying to manage change, but they're not agile.
Well, they're trying. I mean,
They're
I'm not
trying, but
defending
they're
them, but NBC already all of a sudden comes out with Peacock, which is really just another version of NBC, but with their shows. So it's a case of catching up, right? I think. Do we have
Well,
any?
what comes to my mind when we think about agile versus dealing with change is the great space race of the 1960s, right? And the Americans were like, well, when we go to space, zero gravity, we need to be able to record our thoughts and stuff. So they developed the space pen, right? So this pressurized ink cartridge, you can write upside down and underwater. They spent millions of dollars so that when they went up to space, they could be able to take notes. That was dealing with change. What did the Russians do? They used pencils. Right. So it's a matter of just because you can do something, sometimes just changing that paradigm or looking at it from a different perspective opens up possibilities. And just being agile is going, okay, typically we take notes with pens. Well, can we question that assumption? Can we, go down to the basic level and build up from there?
Yeah. So you bring up a good point about perspective. Let's talk about that for a minute. I once heard a sales trainer saying, we're not here for sales training, but if you see the world through your customer's eyes, you'll see the way your customer buys. And I think that, it's important to look, I say internal and external customers. So I think to be more agile, to have a more agile culture, we have to see what we do from everyone in the organization's perspective. What are your thoughts?
Absolutely. I mean, if you, are you asking me or are you asking the chat box?
Anybody.
Are you saying from the organization's perspective or the customer's perspective?
No, I'm saying the organization first. I know it has to be external too, but from the organization's perspective, I think it's tough sometimes for upper management to put themselves in the shoes of everyone in the organization. And that's the only way that you're going to become more agile.
Right. I think you need that buy-in. And I think it's a fundamental point is you only become agile if you truly want to become agile. It's the bad joke. How many psychiatrists does it take to change a light bulb? Right? Only one, but the light bulb has to want to change.
Right.
So if you have the upper level of management pushing this, going, you must be agile, you must do this, you must, and pointing the finger and yelling, you might be able to coerce people and intimidate people to act in a certain way, but I guarantee you it will not be sustainable because the culture it creates will become toxic. So yeah, it's one thing to dictate it, but it's a completely different energy if you co-create it or you have the buy-in or you have the town hall meeting and have people express what's important to them and then have someone articulate, hey, in order to do this, you will get what you want if we're able to be more agile, as an example. So you have that buy-in from every level rather than, and that's top down, but bottom up is the same thing. If the bottom up is saying, oh, we need this, but the top doesn't hear them, again, you have this disconnect and you go nowhere. And until the bottom can say, hey, we know what's important to you. You want to please the stakeholders. You want to please the bottom line. You want to please the environmental activists. Well, by doing this, we're going to help you create that.
Absolutely.
In my experience, I think far more often it's the bulk of the employees who want to change faster than their organization is, who want to be more agile, who want to be more flexible, and they're frustrated because they feel their hands are tied from the leadership above. But you're right on, Sunjay. I mean, this goes to the heart of all of our culture conversations because you have to have open and honest and totally transparent communication to build an agile organization. You have to have trust. You cannot have micromanagers and be agile. You have to have employees working autonomously. You have to understand what your customers' needs are to be able to pivot on a dime. You have to make sure there aren't 18 friggin' levels of approval. And Sunjay, back to your point, every friggin' organization on the planet says, oh, we value change. We want you to adapt and embrace change, until somebody actually does, and then they get crapped on for trying something different. And of course, what happens? Everybody retreats back into their shells.
To something you just said there, Michael, which was it's often from the bottom up that this change occurred. I think, though, it depends on the equilibrium of the culture. What I mean by that is if it's already accepted and it's bought in, then people, as they come in, learn whatever exists there. So if it starts off down here, yeah, the only way it ever changes is if once you get that momentum, people lift it up. But if it starts off up here and people are new to the organization, they kind of rise to whatever that equilibrium is. I'm going to use an example that I think I've used before, but if I have, I apologize. Years ago, everyone has their story about, hey, I stayed at the Ritz-Carlton, it was fantastic, and the customer service. But I want to use this because I really think it illustrates what we're talking about. I was doing a session, and it was actually in the Middle East at the Ritz-Carlton, and they only served bottled water. Now, often when I do sessions, especially when they're like whole day, half day programs, I peel the label off my water. And the reason I do that is because I always put my water down, I always forget where I put it. So it's really a very pragmatic thing. So anyways, doing the session, there's a break, and the water boy, and I'm saying that very facetiously on purpose, the water boy comes and he's refreshing the waters. And he comes to me and he says, excuse me, sir, I noticed you were peeling your water label. I've taken the liberty of peeling this one. This isn't the fresh one, it's for you. And very, very small thing, but it blows my mind that the water boy and the loyal man on the totem pole understands what the organizational culture is. And I actually questioned him about it later. And he, they have some slogan at the Ritz, something about ladies and gentlemen serving ladies and gentlemen. And so this guy brought me to the back room, and it's like this big crest on the wall. But it's one thing to have lip service and just to say it and have people regurgitate it, but to actually truly implement it and have it be ingrained in the culture, because it's not about rules. There's not a rule book that says, when a guest is peeling the label off their water, you must refresh it with a peeled water. It's not about that. It's about owning it, internalizing it, and looking for opportunities to execute what's important. And the only way you ever get that is buy-in throughout every level of within the organization.
And giving employees the freedom to do that, and the freedom to screw up, the freedom to make mistakes, and freeing them from the onerous things that are preventing them from doing that. Freeing employees from bureaucracy, red tape, excessive layers of decision-making, in order to free them to be truly agile and adapt to the client's needs.
You do know that we have a lot of government people on this, our audience, right? So I want to be careful here, okay? Because what we've just done is we've interchanged change, the word change, with agility, whereas agility is really the reaction to change, right? You can't be agile without change, but it really is about how do you react. So my question to you, to our brilliant audience actually in the chat box first, is, what are the obstacles to being agile? Not the obstacles to change, the obstacles to being agile. And how you react. I'd love to know what, sorry?
I was going to say the term that I use all the time is jobsticles, identifying the jobsticles, job obstacles that are in the way of change, in the way of being agile. Hey, Natasha.
Who's monitoring our chat?
We've got
there's only 3 of us. We can read it.
Too many chefs, right?
Too many chefs.
Company rules, absolutely.
Yeah, actually, that whole thing about rules,
trusting
trusting
the outcome of the change, fear.
Yes. Lynette, let me just address, Lynette used the word risk, and we're going to talk about that in a few minutes, because you can't be agile without taking some kind of a risk. I say that with creative thinking as well. And so we'll talk a little bit about risk taking. So guys, you've got all these obstacles. Let's talk quickly about how do we remove them? How do we overcome any one of those? Jill, an interesting one, it would be money, funds to become more agile, right? Or to tackle the change. Well, I'm going to just talk to the last one. When leaders want you to change, but when you do it, is a slap down, as Michael referred to. And that's, we've talked about this in the past, but you don't get buy-in from upper management. It's impossible to be agile. Now, the one thing, I have a client right now I was talking to, because I knew we were going to be doing this program, I was talking to her yesterday, and she said exactly that problem. The organization's too big. Upper management just doesn't want to buy into agility. She said, but doesn't mean that I can't make my team more agile. And I thought that was a good point, right? It doesn't have to be organization-wide. She says, we definitely have a team culture that's different than our corporate culture. I thought that was really interesting. I wanted to bring it up today. So.
For sure. I see that all the time. Different departments, different teams, totally different culture. And in those smaller units, I think it is easier to be agile. You can be more entrepreneurial, right? You can think like a small business and do things a lot quicker.
You know,
I did
Shannon
work
said,
with a company. It was a trucking company, and what they did is they did a lot of eating of other companies, that which how they grew. And it's one of the things that I thought that they did brilliantly was they allowed each unit to have their own autonomy. And so there were certain things that they did, like payroll was a big company function, but they allowed each separate organization to run as an entrepreneurial organization. So you could have had one group, subset of this group, to be extremely agile, and the others to be really lethargic. And so, yeah, and even taking it a step lower, even if your team isn't agile, doesn't mean you can't be, because what you get is you get that spillover effect, right? Eventually, if your team is running and firing all cylinders, and other parts of the organization kind of look over and go, well, what is it they're doing? We want to learn from that. And if you can't even get to the team yet, you start with the individual level, then other people on the team kind of go, what is it you're doing that is working? Because I want to learn from that. And then you kind of let it grow.
yeah.
Yeah. Frederick points out in the chat box that the biggest obstacle in the government is lethargy. I think that's a great word. And I think just complacency for anybody, right? As I say to my clients all the time, if the pace of change outside your organization exceeds the pace of change on the inside, it's just a matter of time before you're in serious doo-doo. You're
unless you're a government agency, right? Because that's not going to go away, and so it doesn't really matter.
I disagree. I mean, I know you're kind of saying it a bit tongue in cheek, but I disagree, because when the gap is large enough, then you're going to get revolts, or revolts is the wrong word, but you're going to get people complaining. You're going to get privatization. You're going to get demonstrations. You'll get some. It just
governments are still in competition, right?
Yeah,
they're competing for the hearts and minds of employees. They're competing for loyal employees. They're competing for tax dollars, the hearts and minds of the tax-paying public. And I think government departments have an obligation to remember that.
Yeah, I want to jump back to, as Shannon said something, fear of the unknown outcome, and we kind of skipped over it. This is huge. And let me when I train with organizations, I ask them, what's the obstacle to being more agile? And the number one thing I hear is fear of failure and fear of the unknown, right? And I don't know if you guys have ever heard that fear was an acronym, false evidence appearing real. And I don't love it, but what I love about it is that it may not seem real to you as a manager, but you know what? It's very real to the people experiencing it. So you can't just skip by it. Want to be more agile? I think we have to debrief fear. Somehow somebody took a chance at some point. Fear of failure. Somebody took a chance and somebody got blamed for failure instead of saying, what did we learn from it? So it is a mindset as well, but that fear is very real.
And flipping that around, right? And saying, boy, if you don't like change, you're going to like being irrelevant a lot less.
You were talking about taking risk and screwing up. And I'm going to circle back to a comment earlier about people saying, too many rules. And I actually rant and rave about this, because I think in general, organizations have too many rules. And we want to get away from rules and espouse values more. Because to me, a rule tries to get to every possible contingency of what happens and what doesn't, whereas a value tries to get to the spirit of what the rule is trying to say. And so this is what we do, though, is we create rules based on someone screwing up.
Right.
Right. So Billy messed up, and people even call it the Billy rule.
Yeah.
Like, and you can probably think of organizational things that's happened, or government, or what it's something went wrong, and rather than addressing the issue, we're going to universally blanket and piss everyone else off within the organization.
Yeah, you punish everybody, right? You punish everybody instead of treating our employees like adults. And again, I think we said this in the last one, but if you've done your hiring and training and onboarding right, you trust your employees to have hired them, trust them to do their jobs, trust them to make decisions, trust them to screw up sometimes in the effort of doing the right thing, but don't pen them in, corral them in with so many rules. But the rule conversation also goes back to something we bring up often, especially with agility. I think it's important to talk about what are the unwritten rules in your organization,
right,
that are guiding some of these fears, that are guiding people's assumptions and behaviors in the face of change. And thank you, Greg, by the way, for pointing out that all governments are not the same.
I want to
know,
apologize.
as a recovering government manager, I know that.
I want to apologize to Greg, just because it's such an easy target, isn't it? That's all. That's all. So, but I understand that.
But again, it goes to the point what we were just saying earlier, that within an organization, if you have a team, you can be an agile team where the rest of the organization is not. And it's the same thing with government. I've done tons of work in government, and I found some of them are like pulling teeth, and others are fantastic, and everything in between. And you can find that same thing within any large organization, right? Because they have an office in Seattle and they're fantastic, but the office in Des Moines is painful, and the office in Toronto is fantastic.
And it becomes so easy for people to default to that position sometimes and shrug their shoulders. Well, we can't do that because we're the government. And I just BS. There's examples all over the world of governments doing creative, innovative things. So we can't use that as an excuse. And that's what it is. It's just an excuse to not do anything.
Let me jump to the next question, and that is, there is a role of trust in agility, right? How do you see that? I'll leave it open. How do you see, why is trust an important part of agility in your mind?
Or we're talking about taking risk. And if you give people the autonomy and you tell them, hey, we want you to make decisions. Hey, we want you to take responsibility for your decision. Hey, we want you to stand up and be accountable. I mean, there has to be an element of trust there. Otherwise, you're sucking and blowing at the same time. And that's not fair. I mean, that again becomes unsustainable. If you're giving people unrealistic expectations and unrealistic criteria of evaluation, then you burn them out. Yeah. And if you burn them out, they don't want to be there. And then your team goes to hell.
Well, I do a talk just on trust in workplaces. And I talk about trust being a keystone value. In other words, an overarching value that so many other things fall out of. If you get trust right, if you give trust, if you earn trust, if you talk about what trust means and how you're going to live that in an out loud way, so many other great values will fall out of that naturally, organically.
Well, you guys talked about employee autonomy, and you can't give more autonomy to employees if there's no trust, right? It works up and it works down. But I think it goes hand in hand with risk taking. I got to try something. I want everybody to do this with me, okay? If you're wearing a watch or a bracelet, would you take it off and hold it up? I know we can't see you, but please do it. Come on, play along. And just put it back on the other arm. Yeah, I know. On the other arm. I know it's uncomfortable. I know you don't want to do it. It's the only team building portion of today's talk. The point I'm trying to make is I'm going to challenge you to keep it on until you go to bed tonight. Now, the point is this: you have to trust me that nothing bad is going to happen by wearing it on this arm, right? And you have to take the risk. And some of you will switch it the minute we sign off at 45 minutes past the hour. So the point I'm trying to make is everyone has a different level of trust or risk taking that they will do. But don't you think it's important that management knows that level for each employee? I mean, can you, the bigger you get? So I'm curious. I can't get my watch back on.
Can you know what? Sorry, Jeff, what's the question?
I have no idea what I just said. So
I have a tan.
It was a good question. It was awesome.
I'm asking that, everybody has a different level. Like I say, let's use this as an example. Some people will switch at the minute we're done, some later on today, and some will take my challenge until we go to bed tonight. That's different levels of risk taking, right? Because for most people, this is too risky. But you have to trust me when I say, if I'm your boss, that switching this watch, guys, is not going to hurt you or harm you. Let's try it till the end of the day. So my question is, that might be okay for some people, but Mike, I know you're risk adverse. No, you're not, but I'm saying as my employee, I know you're risk adverse. How do I identify that in all my employees? It's impossible if we're a huge organization.
Right, but again, from a cultural point of view, I think you can do things to shift the culture, and starting with just talking about it openly, making sure that people aren't being punished for making mistakes. In fact, that you're actively rewarding and recognizing people who do make smart mistakes in the interest of doing something right. And remembering, risk is a mathematical formula. Risk experts talk about how risk equals consequence plus probability. And you can play around with those numbers. So you can talk about that in a meeting situation. What is the worst case scenario? We implement this idea. What's the worst thing that can go wrong? And then what can we do to minimize that worst case scenario? And what can we do to minimize the probability of that worst case scenario happening? And I think just starting by talking about it.
Can I do today's math lesson? So there's a math
We knew
concept.
you would.
Exactly. There's a math concept called expected value. Now, if you remember expected value, you've never learned it, 10 seconds or less. Expected value is your probability of what happening plus the outcome. So what the result. So let me explain it more practically. If the expected value of something is greater than 0, it's a good bet. If it's less than 0, it's a bad bet. So if you look at the expected value, you go to the casino and you play roulette and you go, what are the chances of 0 hitting and 1 hitting, and you add up all the expected values, it'll add up to a negative number. So that's why the house always wins, right? But if you look at like you're saying, take the worst case scenario, what is the actual probability of it happening? Well, let's look at the best case scenario with the probability of it happening. You'll find that taking smart risk actually has a positive expected value, which means that there's a mathematical incentive that says, if we empower our people, if we trust our people, if we equip our people, it actually, even though we are going to have pitfalls and we are going to have losses and there's going to be yucky, overall, it's good for us. Similarly, if you draw the analogy to the casino, it doesn't mean the casino never loses. It means over the long period of time, because the expected value is positive for the casino, they will always win. The expected value for an organization, taking smart risk, empowering your people, is positive as well, and means in the long run you benefit from it.
One thing, I want to get to a few comments in the chat box too, but thank you for that, Sunjay. And when we talk about this idea of risk too, one thing I always stress so much is the importance of creating that psychologically safe, comfortable environment in meetings in the workplace where we recognize that the risk of throwing out an idea should be 0. That's what you want to ultimately aim for, because all you're doing right now at this point is talking. You're talking about ideas. You're suggesting ideas. You're not implementing anything. Nothing's happened yet. All you're doing is throwing out ideas. And the closer you can get to a culture where people see that that is a 0 risk prospect to throw out a crazy idea, I think the more successful you're going to be.
And one of the ways that you can do that is through role modeling, is have someone with clout, whether it's formal clout or informal clout, social clout or whatever, the CEO, have them mess up and own up something that they messed up, or throw an idea or take a risk and highlight, and you don't want them to look like a superstar necessarily. You want to show that, oh, this is a dumb idea and here's why. I'm obviously not saying that politically correct, but I'm saying is have them take a risk that doesn't work and show them what the consequences are. And when you have enough people do that, over time, that's what a culture is. It's that little small baby steps.
Yeah. We've got a question here from my friend Greg. So good to see you here, Greg. On the topic of agility and way beyond IT projects, has any of the panel explored using Agile Scrum techniques to change how people work together, and by doing so, improve the culture of an organization?
I think first, because I think Scrum will be a foreign word to a lot of people. It's to simplify it, and I don't mean to simplify it, but I think that's what we need. It's just it's based on a mindset. It's that cultural mindset. It's different from the existing culture. So when it's introduced, in my experience, there are at least different characteristics of Scrum that help it to spread within the organization. So it basically comes down to, I think, the 4 things I would think: quality, value, team, and trust. And Greg, if I'm wrong, please let me know. But yes, we've explored it. It's an easier way to explain to the organization really how to be more agile, because it has those tenets. So I just wanted to sort of talk about what Scrum is and techniques. But Greg, I think we need to have Greg as a co-host, don't you?
For sure.
So,
yes, reach out to it. Yes, that would be awesome. And Shannon's getting lots of love in the chat box for pointing out, I'm trying to see Shannon's original, but trust having an element of vulnerability, and that some leadership aren't comfortable with vulnerability, and that there's turning over a certain amount of power or control, right? That you have to cede as a leader.
Yeah.
And that's very true.
And people are giving her kudos because they're all facing the same challenge. I wish we had a solution. How do you get past that, or how do you deal with it? Not sure we can. So interesting. Thank you, Shannon. And maybe Shannon needs to be a co-host too. So remember,
everybody
guys,
in the chat needs to be do one turn as co-host.
We had Lori and Natasha and Steven, and we've had great co-hosts. So
we'll be in our 80s doing this once we get through everybody in the chat box.
For some of that's a little sooner than others. I'm just saying.
Yeah. So Mike, don't take a drink. You're big on partnering with customers. Let's focus externally for a minute. How does becoming more agile relate to listening to customers or partnering with customers in your mind?
I'm going to bring up somebody who I never thought in a million years I would bring up, my music idol, Kanye West. I've never listened to in my life. But Kanye West did a very interesting thing with one of his last creations. He basically iterated his music with his audience, with his rabid fan base, going back and forth with feedback from them, working with them almost in real time. So talk about being agile and creating a true partnership. And I think if you're going to be truly agile, you absolutely have to have your pulse on what your customers want. You have to have as much data as you can possibly get about what your customers are moving towards and needing, and what they're missing and lacking in real time. And you have to partner with your customer. You have to partner with the customer early on in the process. We have to get, I think the world is moving away from this idea where, you're going to spend 2 years developing some product only to find out nobody wants it and it's not selling and it sucks, versus right from the onset, bringing your clients, your customers into the process so that you can adapt, you can do things in real time. In fact, there's all sorts of tech companies that literally are releasing beta versions of their software, of their programs, partly as a strategic move to partner with their customers in real time so that they can build things as they go. And again, you look at a company like Netflix that I brought up earlier. Netflix, for example, they do not use a pilot model for TV shows, right? They think that is grotesquely out of date. The standard broadcasting networks, they have that whole costly process of pilots, of the pitch, creating a pilot at great expense, and then blah, 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 we'll see if it goes. Well, Netflix has totally done away with that, partly because they have so much data from their customer base that they can make what they think are smarter decisions in far quicker timeframes without relying on that old, outdated model. But it all comes down to partnering is the word I go back to all the time. Partnering with your customers to be as agile as possible.
And obviously, customer experience, I have a bit of a passion for. So, a suggestion that I don't know how people, our audience, can interpret it, but when you talk about partnering, it can be literal as well. I mean, literally partnering with them. What do I mean? I get organizations, when I consult with organizations, I get them to identify their top 5 clients. And it doesn't have to be the biggest clients, the biggest customer. It's not necessarily the one who gives you all the money. They trust you, they'll only order from you, however you define it. And then I say, I want you to partner with them. And what I mean is, I'll give you an example. I had a wire company in Houston years ago that we did this. And their biggest client, they called them up, and their shipping department of my client met with the receiving department of their client. Not the managers. These were the guys who literally unloaded the trucks, and they had breakfast together. And one, the client said to how can we make your job easier? They said, you're sending it to us in big cable wires where we have to cut it down for our clients. It would help if you would help us cut it down before it goes, that kind of thing. And, and then accounting met with receivables, met with payables, and they had breakfast together. And again, it wasn't just managers, it was everybody. And I got to tell you something. First of all, talk about creating barriers to entry. Sorry, this is probably off topic, but there is no way that customer is ever going to leave you, because they have such an ingrained, and it goes back to what Stephen Rayfield just said, is find your client's problems and provide the solution. Well, that sounds great, but I'm talking at every level of the organization. That's truly partnering. And when you partner like that, you become more agile because you have to change depending on their needs. And by the way, last thing, that wire company's needs were far different than the cable company I talked to and did the same thing, right? So the supply, so that you have to be far more flexible in what you do. Sorry, I'll pass it on to you, Sanjay.
I don't know. I was listening. I don't even remember what were we talking about? Agility.
About partnering, how partnering with your
I was going to say that the other thing too that's really key is it is an ongoing process. This has been brought up a couple of times today. But what your client wants now is different from 6 months from now. So it's not one time where they sit down where accounts receivable sits down with the accounts payable. Maybe it's once a year because technology changes, because the customer changes, because a pandemic hits, because whatever. But things will change. And what Netflix customers want today, in the 90s, it was all about X-Files and the sci-fi kind of alien spoofy things. And now it's not as much of that, right? It's I don't even know what it is. I don't watch enough Netflix. It's Game of Thrones and Breaking Bad. No, am I dating myself? I don't know. But the point is, it does change, and it's an ongoing process. To the point, I think Jeff, you brought it up earlier. We're not an agile company. We're in the process of becoming more agile. We're on the, we're a work in progress. We're agile-ish. So,
Mike, you mentioned data and how important it is. So, can you kind of talk to that about the role of data and being flexible?
Well, I think it takes data to understand what your customers want, who your customers are, where they are, and what they truly want. And the more data you have around that, the more you can customize, tailor things to your customers' needs. The more you can switch on a dime to make sure you are adapting to what they need.
I bring it up because Laurie said data drives results. Yeah. And the proof is in the pudding for this example. Yeah.
There's a fascinating book that some of you might be, that's kind of related to this topic, I think, actually, called Subscribed. I don't know if anybody, write in the chat box if you've read it, but it's about essentially how every single, including government agencies, every organization under the sun is moving towards a subscription model for everything they do. And that is the way of the future. And tied into a subscription-based model is the need to be agile. And it's very much threaded throughout the book, but it's an interesting book about how rapidly industries are changing and how quickly, and you think about things, well, that maybe can't fit a subscription model. Well, this book will convince you otherwise. There is not an industry under the sun that they aren't figuring out how to turn into a subscription
I was thinking of charging my sons to be their father.
There you go.
A weekly
monthly fee,
weekly subscription.
Yeah, lock them in to get a recurring credit charge from them. So
it's weird though, because we have that relationship. It's the only problem is I'm getting a negative amount. That's the problem with the model.
Mike, you want to put the name of the book?
Oh, I will. Yeah.
Box. I want to just go to what Carol's saying, because Carol says agility sounds exhausting. If it involves constantly changing, how can anyone keep up with that without having a mental breakdown? I think that it's pinpointing the touch points in the organization that need to change, not saying the organization needs to change. And touch points, so I define them as any opportunity we have to influence the customer experience, internal or external. And if that's true, then we identify specific touch points that need to be tweaked, need to be made a little better. That's where we focus on change. So Carol, I think you're thinking of it in, as eating the elephant, when we're talking about it as eating one piece at a time. Lisa put the actual link.
Lisa's far more helpful than I am. Thank you for that, Lisa.
Exactly. You guys want to read one of those?
The book?
No.
Yes, I'm reading from Greg. He has an ally who's developed a simple survey algorithm that builds a shared understanding of performance in any type of relationship. implemented 2,800 times since 1986, the algorithm provides a view of both importance and performance for various elements of the relationship.
Okay, wait, I'm taking back that invitation. Greg, we do not want you as co-host because you are, once you know, if you're that much smarter than the host, then we're in big trouble. So, but
And
no,
Carol's having an elephant for dinner.
I'm kidding.
Greg definitely knows his data. He's
Yeah. So we got to tie things up a little bit. So last thoughts on agility and any, how about one piece of advice when it comes to change or agility, guys? I'll start. Let me model it. So mine is, I think that you have to, thank you. I think, Mike, you're very intent. I think you got to just accept that there's always more than one right answer. And I truly think that, I believe that when you think you've got the right answer for handling a changing situation, dealing with your customer, you got to tell yourself that every invention, every creative idea, every innovative company started because somebody dared to look for the second right answer. So it's simply saying, I've seen this 1,000 times before, I know exactly what to do, and then saying, wait, you know what? Maybe there's a second right answer. To me, that's the beginning of being a more agile mindset.
I think buy-in. How clear can you be within an organization on an individual level, on a team level, whole organization level, to why is it you want to be agile? Because maybe you don't. I don't think that serves you in the long run. But the point is, you're going to have disconnect and headbutting if you have some people that want to do and some people that don't. So you need to get on the same page and be articulate and be clear as to why you want to do it, what are the benefits of doing it, and how do you get buy-in from every level.
Yeah. I love what Lynette just said too. You can always change what you just changed.
Yeah,
that's maybe a little more change management than agility, but I remind people of that all the time. If you're implementing a new idea, employees need to feel safe, right? So they need to hear, hey, we're going to try this for X number of time, or we have a plan B and a plan C if this doesn't work, or if this doesn't work, here's what's going to happen. So everybody just, don't freak out. We got this covered regardless of how this unfolds. Celebrate the quick victories, celebrate the small milestones on the way to bigger success. But so on that note, I'll just say my last piece of advice, as I always like to circle back to, is ideally this should be fun. This should be an adventure. So the more humor, the more fun you bring into your meetings, into your organization, the more you embrace this spirit of fun. And remember that ha plus ha equals aha, and treat this as a fun adventure, the more successful I think you're going to be.
Wait, that sounds amazing. Could you say that again? No, I'm kidding. You've said it before, but absolutely, guys.
It was a math question. I loved it.
Ha plus ha equals aha.
We're coming to the end of another wonderful edition of Every Other Wednesday. I want to mention before I turn it over to you, Mike, that we were very serious. If you're interested in co-hosting, please reach out to us. Mike Kerr has his email address right there. And I forget the rest of what I was going to say. So, Mike, why don't you tell us what's going to be next?
Why don't I tell you what the rest of what you were going to say is?
Yes, please.
Hey, thanks. Yeah, thanks, Jeff. Thanks for everybody, as always, for joining us on this Every Other Wednesday. Of course, we're going to be back, same bat channel, same bat time, 2 weeks from now, June 16th. And we are going to have a special guest panelist. If some of you were at my book launch, you will have met her briefly, Dr. Lisa Belanger, who is an expert in health behaviors. And what sparked my interest in bringing Lisa into this discussion partly was an article, Harvard Business article I came across the other day that talked about the difference between being highly stressed at work and being burnt out, and how those two things how stress doesn't necessarily have to lead to burnout. And Lisa is very much an expert on the topic of burnout, work-life balance, how to recharge, refuel your batteries, and how to identify the early signs, early symptoms of burnout. So I know we're going to have a great, fun conversation with Lisa. So join us next June 16th for another.
And I have a challenge for everyone in the audience, and that is, and I'm very serious about this. Would you just send, when you get a notice that the Every Other Wednesday is coming up next day or in 2 days, would you forward it to somebody? We'd love some some new
You need new
people
friends.
joining us and giving us ideas. Not that we don't love you, but and
We just want more of you.
we just want more of you.
We'd love you more if.
That's it. So
I
please
send it to
post on
many
social
somebodies,
media.
as many somebodies as you can send it to. Your pets,
And I
your
just want to
family members,
say,
your in-laws.
having talked to Lisa myself, I got to tell you, I am so excited about this show, and we should have hundreds of people. So please forward it when you get the notice. Guys, until next time, I think that's it. We're out of here. So thanks so much, everybody.
Thanks.
Live
Enjoy.
long and prosper all. Be safe.
Cheers.